This is Kelly Davis, your host of the Untold Miracles podcast, and today I am so excited to have an internationally renowned and best-selling author, journalist, screenwriter, radio and television broadcaster, and musician on the show. His books have collectively sold more than 39 million copies worldwide and have been made into Emmy Award-winning and critically acclaimed television movies. His book, Tuesdays with Morrie, is the best-selling memoir of all time, and currently his new book, The Next Person You Meet in Heaven, is number 7 on the New York Times bestsellers list. He's also a big philanthropist and has a heart of gold. Mr. Mitch Albom, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I am just so grateful that you made the time to be on the podcast today because I know you're on your book tour and you have a lot going on, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, too. You do good work and have a good message.
Well, thank you. Well, you're a man of many talents. You're a musician, a best-selling author, a host of a weekly show, a sports writer, a columnist. You founded 8 charities that help children, orphans, and people in need. And I'm just excited to talk to you today because you create so many miracles in this world.
Well, I don't know if they're miracles or just a lot of hard work, but I'll take them either way.
Well, I want to start with your writing. I want to know how your love for writing began, and were there any miracles involved going from volunteering at the Queen's Tribune to becoming best-selling author?
I have a very convoluted path to becoming whatever it is that I am today. I started out as a musician, and that's all I ever really wanted to be, so I never really wrote anything in high school or in college or anything like that. I got out and I was working as a musician, kind of a starving musician in New York City, pretty much a cliche. And I just happened to be in a supermarket and bought some ice cream and some popcorn, which is what I was living on. And they threw a newspaper into my bag. And when I got home, this newspaper, which was a free newspaper that they gave out in the supermarket, had a little ad asking for people, if they had free time, if they could help with this newspaper. And I had some free time, so I went down, I volunteered, as you pointed out, and I kind of fell in love with writing by accident and then sort of tumbled into writing more for them and eventually went back to school for it and got a job. So the first little miracle was the fact that somebody put that newspaper in my bag that happened to have an ad for it, because if that didn't happen, I doubt I'd be a writer today. The second really big miracle was after I had become a successful sports writer and was sort of heading on that path, and I figured that would just be pretty much my life, just sports and broadcasting sports, writing sports, etc. Then one night when I happened to be home, it was a Friday night, I was flipping through the television and remote control and happened to hit the Nightline program right at the time when they were talking to an old professor of mine named Morrie Schwartz. And it was only through that chance flipping of the remote control that I found out that this professor of mine, who I had adored back in college and had been very close with and then had lost touch with over the years, was dying from Lou Gehrig's disease. And I flew out to see him, what I thought would be a one-time visit, and 1 turned to 2, and 2 to 3, and 3 to 4, and turned out to be all the Tuesdays that Morrie had left in his life. And I ended up writing a little book called Tuesdays with Morrie to pay his medical bills. That was the whole reason that I wrote it. And in a continuing little series of miracles, the same miracle that managed to bring me there just by putting me in front of that TV set that night, otherwise I never would have gone, turned this little book, which was, I mean, they only printed 20,000 copies for the whole world, and nobody ever thought they'd have those. I thought I'd have them in the trunk of my car the rest of my life. And somehow one person read it and shared it with somebody else, and that book went on to become the biggest-selling memoir of all time and changed my life dramatically and really opened my eyes to what's really important in life, particularly in light of when we face our mortality. So all those things had to sort of happen for me to even be on this podcast with you. So I consider that a whole series of little miracles that have bumped me along the way.
And what's also incredible is the number of times that your book was rejected by a publisher before it was picked up.
So many that I honestly can't count. And I don't consider that a miracle. I just consider that to be some bad decisions on some people's part. But no, it's true. I went around New York City and tried to get somebody to buy this book because I just wanted to pay Morrie's medical bills. And I really do think it was kind of divinely guided, because if it had just been an idea, let's say I had an idea for a book about a kid who goes to sorcery school in Hogwarts or something. And I had gone around to a bunch of publishers, and they had all said, no, it's stupid, you can't write it, and blah, blah, blah. I probably would have given up and said, well, I guess I need to come up with a better idea. But because this was really for somebody else, I was just trying to find a way to pay Morrie's medical bills, which he didn't have the money to do. I think, God kind of helped me out and kind of kept nudging me and keep going, you'll find somebody. And eventually we found one publisher who was willing to do it. But we had so many people just basically walk us out of the office and say no thanks. Many of them didn't even meet with me. They said, well, you're a sports writer. You can't write a book like that. Nobody wants to read a book like that. It's depressing. It's boring. So the fact that it got published at all is a little bit of a miracle. And then the fact that it became what it did is an even bigger one.
You were able to publish it before he died, correct? Or find a publisher before he died?
Mm-hmm.
And you were able to pay his medical expenses. So it wasn't just a want, you made it happen. You recently published the long-anticipated sequel to your critically acclaimed novel, 5 People You Meet in Heaven, called The Next Person You Meet in Heaven. It's already topping the New York Times bestsellers list. I read it about a week ago, and I loved it. And I want to know if there were any miracles that went into the process of making the book. And what do you want readers to take away from reading it?
Those are 2 very big questions, and not necessarily answerable in one short answer. As far as any miracles involved in writing that book, well, I wouldn't have written that book, to be honest with you, if you had asked me 5 years ago. I wrote The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, but it was never intended to be a book that had a sequel to it. I had a lot of people ask me what happens to. The first book was about an old man who dies saving a little girl from an accident in an amusement park, and he pushes her out of the way of a falling cart, and he dies instead. And he goes to heaven, and he meets 5 people from his life, and he finds out that this insignificant life that he thought he led was very significant, touched many people. He just didn't realize it while he was here on Earth. And I had a lot of people over the years say to me, well, what happened to Eddie after that? Where did he go next? What was the next stage of heaven? What happened to the little girl? But my answer was always, well, use your imagination. I never thought about writing a sequel to it. And then some of your listeners may know that I operate an orphanage in Haiti, and I have 47 children there. And one of them, 3 or 4 years ago, developed a brain tumor. She was only 5 years old. We brought her up to America, and we adopted her basically as our daughter and spent the next 2 years traveling around the world trying to find a cure for her. And that was a real miracle because she was supposed to die after 4 months, and instead she lived for 2 years. And during those 2 years, we had the amazing miracle of being able to have a family and to see what that was like with a child of our own. And she had a chance to have a family because she never had really that either. And so she inspired me in many, many ways, and ultimately inspired me to write a sequel to The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, because heaven was a lot on my mind at that point. And this ends up being a story about a girl who is 8 years old when something tragic happens in her life, and then follows her when she goes to heaven. And I don't want to give the book away, but there's some scenes involving a baby in heaven, and all of that comes from my feelings about the loss of our little girl. Chika was her name. A string of miracles took place there just to get me in front of the computer screen to write that story.
What an incredible human being. I love one of the things that she said. She's like, you got to fall in love because you got to fall in love, while you're on this planet. And even though I don't know her and I didn't know her, I feel like she was the brightest light. And I appreciate you sharing that story about her because I did want to talk to you about that. But we'll go back to her in a minute. But I do want to know what you want readers to take away from reading the book.
Like in the first book, Eddie was a man who thought he didn't matter in life. He thought he was a nobody and a nothing. And he had a blue-collar job, and so he equated his job with his importance on Earth. And when he got to heaven, he found out that his job had nothing to do with it. In fact, there was a reason that he was doing that job, and a reason that he was keeping children safe. And so that book was for people who thought that they were nobodies, and it was shared with a lot of people around the world who felt that way. This book, Annie, the little girl he saved, this is the story of what happens to her as she grows up. So she grows up because of that day thinking that everything she does is a mistake. Everything's going to go wrong. Everything's going to go bad. And ultimately, when she goes on her heavenly journey, she finds out that A lot of things she thought were a mistake actually were not a mistake, and they happened for a reason. And so I hope that people who feel that everything they do turns bad, or no matter what they try, everything goes south, I hope they read this book and see, no, it might just be you're not understanding how things are connected, and that mistake that you made may lead an opportunity for you to do something good, and the wrongs we do lead us to chances to do right. And so I hope, overwhelmingly, that's the top message that people take from this book.
Well, I loved it. I read it in a day and a half, and there were a couple lines that I really liked from the book that I want to share with you that really impacted me. And it was, sometimes we embrace our scars more than our healing. All endings are also beginnings. We just don't know it at the time. The ending of Chika's life, that was last April 2017. What was that a new beginning of for you?
That was the beginning of an appreciation for every minute that I have left on earth and every minute that I can spend with a child, and also an appreciation for childhood and how to cherish it and protect it. I have been closer to our children down in Haiti than I ever was after going through what I did with Chika. And a couple of months after she died, we went and we flew to Jeremy, which is this little area of Haiti that got terribly hit by the hurricane that you might recall blew through there earlier last year in 2017, and decimated the country. And we flew there, and we had not taken any new children since Chika got sick. My focus was always just on trying to get her better, and just didn't have any time to take in any new ones. And after she passed away, and we took her to Haiti for her funeral, and we buried her there, which is where she belongs, in her homeland. And then a couple months later, I was flying to Jeremy, and we put out the word that we would take young girls, 3 years old, which was the age that Chika was. And we ended up taking in 5 little girls from that area who had all lost their homes, and many lost their parents, and didn't have anybody to take care of them. And when we got back and brought them to the orphanage, Chika's baby brother, Morrie, had been brought to the orphanage by the man who had been taking care of him, who had come to the funeral for Chika and said, maybe this is meant to be, but, I don't have any money to take care of my own family. I've been taking care of him for years. Could you take care of him? And since he looks so much like Chika, there was very little that I could say otherwise except okay. And so that was the beginning of his time and these other 5 little girls' time with us in Haiti, which goes on to this day. And whenever I go down there, which is every month, little Moise jumps on me and doesn't let go. I mean, I've never felt it's like a death grip. He just holds on to me, and never, for the whole time I'm there, he can hold on with his legs. I don't even have to use my arm. And he just hangs on to me. There's some kind of connection between us that I'm sure is just kind of guided by Chika, and that was the beginning of that. So many, many things have started as a result of her passing. And I meant what I said in that book. All endings are also beginnings. We just don't know it at the time.
I also want to share another line that I really loved. We fear loneliness, but loneliness itself does not exist. It has no form. It is merely a shadow that falls over us. And just as shadows die when light changes, that sad feeling can depart once we see the truth. What's the truth? The end of loneliness is when someone needs you, and the world is so full of need. What inspired that line?
Those kids again, same thing, and all the charity work that I've done. I don't have time to be lonely, and I found that one of the reasons that people that I know who are not lonely work in the charity world is because every day they're encountering people who say, thank you for coming, and thank you for being here, thanks for helping me, can you help me? And it's one of the reasons I think we know and see a lot of people who have a lot of money who end up taking their own lives or turning to drugs. And at the core of it, they just feel sort of alone in the world. And you say, how can you be alone? You've got all this and you've got all that. But I've realized that what you've got has nothing to do with how alone you feel. And sometimes when you're just busy taking care of yourself, that's the loneliest existence that there is when you're just doting on yourself. But when when I open the car door at our orphanage and 47 kids come plowing at me and almost knock me over and jump all over me, there's no time to feel lonely because all of them need your tending to. They need your attention. They need food. They need loving and caring, and they need to be put to bed and told bedtime stories. And so there's not a minute to be lonely. And I kept that in mind when I was writing that particular person in heaven who was talking to Annie about loneliness. She feels lonely her whole life, but she realizes, well, the times she didn't feel lonely is when she became a nurse and she started helping people, or when she briefly became a mother and had a child to look after. And so sometimes we think like loneliness is something you catch, like, oh, I got the flu, oh, I got lonelies, I got the lonelies, But it's not that. It isn't physical. Like I say, it's just something that clouds your vision, the way you look at the world, and you see it through the eyes of a lonely person, and then the same good things can look bad to you. But if you just go out and help somebody, you'll feel so much less alone, and that's why I put that in the book.
Mitch, how is it that you're able to have the time in the day to support 8 charities and do your job and be a parent to these 47 kids? I'm just curious how you make it work.
You have to really compartmentalize, that's for sure. You have to be done with one thing and then say, okay, I'll come back to that tomorrow, but I've got to get this other thing done here now, and realize that you can't fix everything in one day. You've got to split up the day into parts. You also have to get up very early, and you have to drink a lot of coffee, and there are a lot of days where I don't feel like I'm doing such a good job of it, even though I'm trying and I have a lot of help, and you cannot do that much stuff alone. You have to have, and I have good people at Haiti and good people here in Detroit and people running all the different charities, and you do have to watch out for doing too much.
What advice do you have for someone who wants to share a story, write a book, but they don't know how or where to start?
Well, first of all, you should write, like the old expression says, write what you know. Number 2, try to write in a voice that's distinctly you. Don't try to use somebody else's voice. Try to write your own voice, and that'll sound honest. And 3, if you are going to tell a story about yourself, whatever, ask yourself, well, why would anybody else want to read this? One of the reasons that Tuesdays with Morrie, I think, became successful is because I tried not to make it about me. Mm-hmm. I made it about the lessons that Morrie was teaching me. Mm-hmm. And because I knew those lessons would be good for other people, too. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why other people were able to embrace that story.
What story is inside of you right now that we can look forward to reading next?
Well, I am writing a book about Chika and all my time and my wife's time with her, and that's going to come out next year. It's going to be the fastest that I've written any book because I want it to come out while it's all still in my heart. So that'll be out next November.
I'm so excited. Favorite book you've written? I know that's hard. It's like asking your favorite child, but do you have a favorite book?
Tuesdays with Morrie from a nonfiction point of view. And from a fiction point of view, I'm always going to be partial to The 5 People You Meet in Heaven because it was my first novel, and it proved that I could do it. But in terms of just sort of enjoying myself, probably be The Magic Strings of Frankie Presto, which was my last book before this one, which was a big, big novel about music and this musician who was gifted with this guitar with 6 magic strings that he could use to change other people's lives with. And I just had a blast writing that book, and we're in the process now of trying to turn it into a big movie. And that was just fun. It was way bigger than anything I'd ever done. And, but my love of music really drove me to that. And it's kind of a personal favorite that I'm hoping will it found a pretty good audience, but I'd like it to find an even bigger audience if we can make a movie version of it and people realize, oh, there's a book about this? Okay, maybe we'll go get that.
Your favorite book you didn't write?
Gilead by Marilyn Robinson. It's a story of an old preacher who was in his 70s and who got married very late in life and had a child. And he's writing a very long letter. Basically, the whole book is one long letter to his child about the world and the world that he's leaving him and what he's learned about it. And it's a mixture of fatherhood and faith and simplicity. And he's kind of a country preacher, so he doesn't have a very complicated life. But the wisdom in the writing is just beautiful, and I found myself reading it over and over and over again.
I want to know your favorite sporting event you've covered.
Probably the Iditarod dog sled race in Alaska. There's nothing like that. You can cover that. You can cover anything. I covered that from beginning to end. Had to fly around in a little biplane and sleep in like on the floors of schoolhouses and sleep next to radiators so you didn't freeze to death, and trudge through the snow and learn how to feed dogs, and it was wild. And boy, talk about people dedicated to their event. That
was very unexpected, Mitch. I thought you might mention some Super Bowl or something like that. But that's great.
No, I've done a lot of those, but only one Iditarod dog sled race.
I want to know the why that motivates you on a daily basis.
Making some kind of difference. I think as you get older, you become far less interested in what you acquire than what you give away. And what you give away isn't in the form of a thing. It's in the form of a memory. And so I find, for example, I have two of our kids from Haiti are up with us right now, staying with us for medical treatments. They're okay. They're going to be fine. But they've been with us for a few weeks here now, and I make them breakfast in the morning. We make eggs together. And I try to teach them some little lesson or something. And as I'm teaching that to them, either in the morning or at night when we put them to bed, I find myself thinking, like, are they going to remember this one day when I'm gone? Am I saying this in a way that they'll one day teach their own kids, and they'll think, oh yeah, Mr. Mitch told me this, and now I'm going to tell it to somebody else. That's kind of the why of my existence at this point.
I want to know the biggest lesson that Chika taught you.
I know that one. She was, this was after she couldn't walk anymore, and I had to carry her from place to place. And so I was kind of her transportation, and we were sitting at the table coloring, which she loved to do. And then I looked at my watch, I realized I was late. And so I jumped up. I said, oh, Chika, I'm really late. I got to go. And she said, no, stay here and color with me. I said, I can't. I got to go. And she said, why do you have to go? I said, because it's my job. And she said, no, it isn't. Your job is carrying me. And I realized after I left that she was absolutely right. My job was carrying her, not just physically carrying her, but carrying her through her life. And then, it's all our jobs to carry our children and to carry those who need our help. She was inadvertently being brilliant, as she often is or was. That was probably the biggest one.
If there were 3 miracles that you could create in the world today, what would that look like for you?
The end of envy, the end of poverty, and the recognition inside everybody's heart that we are all more alike than different. And we would stop defining ourselves by how different we are from the next person, and instead define ourselves by how similar we are. It's so funny because people, like when they have kids, oh, he looks like me. He looks like me. No, he looks like a wife. No, he looks more like me. We fight over like how similar we want to be to our kids, right? But with other people in the world, it's like, that guy's so different than me. Look at the way he talks. Look at the way he dresses. Look at his skin color. Look at how he works. Look at what he does. All we want to do is separate ourselves. And I don't understand why within our family we're all about how much alike we can be. And with the rest of the world, we act like, the whole point is to differentiate ourselves. If we just treated the rest of the world like our family, everybody would get along a whole lot better. And so I would create that inside people, and I think the rest would take care of itself.
February 5th marks the beginning of Lunar New Year and the Year of the Pig in the Chinese Zodiac. To bring good fortune to your family this year, visit your nearest Panda Express location to feast on lucky foods. Panda Express guests will receive a red envelope good for a free chicken egg roll on February 5th, and donations will be accepted for your local children's hospital at the register.